Wake up. It's time for Primal Scream.
Hey, welcome back to the Primal Scream. I'm Matt.
I am Todd.
And, today's...
Did you just record me like just jabbering away? Is that on there?
No, I started out with, hey, welcome back to the Primal Scream. I'm Matt.
And was I in the background going,
Now you are.
Oh, no, I am. Now everybody knows what I sound like when I'm not being serious.
Damn it. Damn you, Matt.
Hey, it's going to be a good one today, dude. I'm very excited.
It's February 7th. We had a busy week. It was a surprise to me. It was a surprise to me, too, that I knew the date. Okay, that's the
Baptism
point.
by fire. Better get used to it.
All right, I'll tone it down a bit. You know what? I have family that are going to listen to this podcast, too, because what we're going to talk about tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is America's Two-Headed Pig. That's correct. Somewhere along the line, someone decided right now is a good time to vacuum upstairs. So if you're hearing this, I apologize.
That dull hum that is your skull, it's not us. It's the vacuuming upstairs.
It's probably my daughter.
Yeah.
My wife is like, hey.
The good thing about tonight is we've wanted to have Leah Dunham on the podcast for quite a while. She's
Since
the author
November.
of Two-Headed Pig. Yep, things fell through. She is pregnant, very, very pregnant. She's joking around about how she hopes she doesn't go into labor when she's on the podcast with us, but it's been nice to actually get a chance to sit down and chat with her. And I think it's going to be opening some eyes for people, because I think we think of our food as being a protected thing. People are looking out for us. That's the idea behind the USDA, the FDA. All those things are there, even the EPA, where they're all there to look out for us. And knowing that corporations run those outfits now and pretty much write the guidelines, write the laws, write the rules for them to benefit themselves at our detriment. And it's not only the things that we're eating vegetable-wise, but it's the high fructose corn syrup that's subsidized. It's GMO foods now going into animals, which we'll talk about tonight.
It's so much more complex than I ever thought it would be. My ideas of farming and getting food at the grocery stores, if I looked at the back of a particular food item box, it would have ingredients. And something that Jamie Oliver from Naked Chef said, if you can't understand what the ingredients are on the back of a box, don't get it.
Right.
If you don't understand what it is, don't get it. It's pretty simple.
And I want to ask Leah this too, but do you think it's Americans that are, I don't want to say lazy, but we're not putting in our due diligence? Or is it that we assume that our government and the corporations that take care of or feed us, that we buy things from, have our best interest to heart? Because part of me is the sense that, we're just fucking dumb. We're too lazy. We don't want to read the box. We don't give a shit where it comes from. Is it cheap? Does it fill my stomach? Great, I'm happy. Does that make us uninformed, or does it make us not searching out the truth of what we need to find out what we're putting in our body? Think of the hippies in the 60s who had communes and grew their own food and all that kind of stuff because they wanted to make sure they were being self-sufficient and sustaining themselves. That is one part of it, I guess. But I guess I grew up under the fact that I assumed that we were being taken care of. Somebody was looking out for us. Why would they ever let me put something in my body that's poisonous?
Yeah, I guess I didn't quite look at it like that. I guess I thought the FDA wouldn't allow any business to put forth a product that was in any way harmful. That period.
Right.
But then you get people would always, back in the day would always look at, well, if it has dietary supplement on it, then it doesn't have to live up to any.
Oh, right.
I mean, if it proclaimed this supplement does this to you, it's a dietary supplement, it actually doesn't have to live up to those claims,
right?
Because it has dietary supplement.
And I grew up with the idea that artificial sweeteners were really bad for you, period, because that's when saccharin came out, which was known to cause cancer. I mean, it's weird now they still have saccharin in stores, and you still have saccharins like in diners, and if you read the back, it has to be on the back of that little teeny pink packet that says it's cancer causing. So it's like, so my feeling is, and I don't know if this is legit, this is goofy or not, but why would you have a product in your store that has a warning label on it that says may cause cancer? here's your option. I mean, why would you even have that product? That's what I guess I'm wondering about. I mean, it's the same thing like you said the other night about alcohol. We know it's not good for us, yet we still drink it. I mean, if something, I don't know. I guess if beer cans had a big label on them that said could cause cancer, I might rethink my options.
I think almost anything nowadays that you go into the grocery store and you purchase is going to possibly cause cancer because we don't have any nutrient-dense food. Even the produce, and we'll talk to Leah about this, I think even the produce that we purchase isn't nutrient-dense. You talked about this on the last podcast. The idea of having to eat 3 tomatoes today, it equaling the same nutrient content of 1 tomato back in the 40s or 50s or 30s.
Well, because they keep upping the amount of vegetables and fruit you should have a day. At first, it was like 3 to 5. Then it was at least 5. Now it's 5 to 8. And I'm telling you, I like vegetables, and I like putting them in smoothies, and I like them. I like broccoli, I like all that kind of stuff. But I'm telling you, I'd be hard fucking pressed to eat 8 servings of vegetables and fruit a day. That's a lot of food. And you know how expensive that's going to be?
$500.
No, that's probably not, but probably pretty close. But I'm just saying, so if I want to go out and do what they're recommending I do, say I do a good job and I shop around and I go to Aldi's and I get a bunch of frozen stuff, right? Frozen vegetables. First of all, they're not GMO free, right? Because that's why they're cheap. And I'm going to have to eat 8 servings of peas, corn, broccoli, beans. That's a lot of food. I mean, that's 3 servings a meal or 2 servings a meal throughout the whole entire day.
Something that I want to ask Leah when she gets on is, has she heard of the Gerson therapy?
Oh yeah, great question.
Because pretty much the whole idea behind him is that we are so deprived of nutrients that our bodies, our livers, start producing toxins. And instead of cleaning our blood and getting the toxins out of our system, it actually becomes so toxic that it's letting out poisons into our body, and then we get cancer. So if we're never eating anything that's nutrient dense, is it just a matter of time? I mean, all this money that we funnel into here, cure cancer over here, these marathons, is it a complete waste of time?
Knowing that what we know is that if you eat super rich, density rich produce and cut back on your meat and cut back on the poison that you put in your body, period, your body can cure itself of cancer.
Well, that's what the Gerson Therapy Institute claims. So, I mean,
you're absolutely right. And we both have had people in our lives that have died of cancer, so we're not trying to make small of it. But it certainly seems like there are situations where we know better. But I mean, it's just, I don't know. I think that Rock and I have been talking a lot about this at work because he's been taking a lot of spirulina. So have I. He's even started adding Collaterate. It's Collaterate. I can't remember the name of it, but it's another pill that you can take that's super dense, rich product. I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to Google and find out. But he blends those up now in his smoothies just to add that much more. And I don't do that, but I do spirulina, and I do a lot of smoothies with lots of greens in it. But he and I were just joking around about how we're having to trim our fingernails all the time now. It's like every 3 or 4 days we have to trim our fingernails because they're growing like weeds. And he feels like he is sharper. Like he thinks clearer, that his reaction times are better, and I'm not as self-aware, I guess, as Rock, so I don't feel that way. I know anytime I eat clean, where if it's just green smoothies and lean meats and trying to get 2 to 3 servings of vegetables every time I sit down to eat something, it's the first thing I eat. I just know I just feel better. We both just feel. You feel the same way. We just feel sharp. We're not bloated. We're not inflamed. All those things aren't working. And inflammatories is one of the biggest things, right? That stem cell therapy to get the injections into certain parts, sole purpose is to take away all inflammation.
I think that's 2 separate treatments. There's one treatment that reduces inflammation severely.
Okay.
There's another treatment that you're taking basically blank stem cells
and they help
that have not been programmed yet to turn into anything.
Right, but for those to work, you got to take inflammation out of whatever it is that's a problem.
I'm not an authority. I really have no idea.
I'm not an authority either, but I read a lot. So
I am not a doctor, but I play one in my head sometimes. Todd?
Yes, sir.
We have Leah Dunham on the phone.
Yes, it's pretty awesome.
Oh, I've been waiting. I've been just anticipating this conversation since November because that's when this all kind of started. It was late November, correct?
Was it? Yeah, it was November. It was right after the summertime.
Because we were trying to get Leah on with her dad, and then we had to try and get it done right away because in December he was going to be super busy.
Right.
And then you got sick, right?
I got really sick.
You and your kids got really sick?
Mm.
My son, I caught some of the middle school geck that was going around, and I'm currently very pregnant.
I was say you're pregnant on top of it.
That help.
That's gotta be the worst. You're making a baby inside you, and on top of it, you're sick as a dog. Oh my gosh!
Well, congratulations on the
draining.
pregnancy.
So I lost my voice for a week and a half. I was just worn out.
So let me tell you a quick thing. I was introduced to Leah because a family member who is a farmer has Leah's father who comes out and checks on their large animals.
Oh, okay.
And she told me at a wedding, oh, you would love this guy, because we were talking about GMO foods and something. I can't remember what the conversation was about. You can tell I'm a really good conversationalist at weddings if we're talking about GMO foods. But so she said, oh, you've got to meet this vet that comes out to us. His name's Art. And I was like, oh, really? What's his gig all about? And so she kind of told me. So of course I, right on the way way home from the wedding, Googled on my phone, America's Two-Headed Pig. And that is what started it. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just message her on Facebook and see what the heck happens. And then there you go. That's what adds. I mean,
And then you told me about it, and we both got the book.
Right, bought the book. Yep,
bought the book, and I gotta say, this is what I really liked about your book right from the get-go. You made the claim: if anybody reads it and they don't agree with me, or that there's something that I didn't, or that you didn't know about, or that maybe you misunderstood, you invite people to contact you and either educate you or clear up any misunderstandings.
Yeah.
You don't see that in books. Usually books are all about
well, this is my first, so
Does that come from your humble Midwest upbringing or what?
It comes with the territory of being in a very opinionated family, and just understanding all the pride behind different agricultural views. I think got a lot of different types of friends with different types of opinions about the things I wrote about, and then also knowing that my dad intends to continue working with his clients, and they might not all agree with what I wrote about.
The other thing I noticed was that you, at the beginning, you say, I have very different way of thinking about this problem. My dad goes a different route slightly, and that the two of you had to come to an understanding before you wrote the book, because he thought that maybe your opinion was a little too hardcore.
Yeah.
And that had to do with CAFOs, correct?
Yeah, with CAFOs, yep.
So for everybody out there who has no clue, a lot of people are like, farming, Iowa? Where is Iowa?
We do have followers in Japan.
Yeah,
so
we have people all over the world.
They may not know what we're talking about. So
yeah, what is a CAFO?
A CAFO is a confined animal feeding operation, typically in Iowa for hogs or cattle, where hundreds, if not thousands, of animals are raised indoors, with the goal to get them to market as efficiently as possible. So
what's your problem with this? I'm going to be the antagonist, so just so you know, I'm going to play devil's advocate because, for no other reason besides it makes good conversation. But two, I also have family members who farm. I have on one side of my family, I have cousins who farm, and they primarily farm corn and soybean. And on the other side of my family, on my wife's side of the family, we have her brother-in-law is a cattle farmer. So I have been bouncing. I've never had these conversations with these family members really ever before. I'm not a farmer, so I had really nothing to talk about. So over the holidays, I was like, hey, you guys, I have some things to talk to you about. I just read this book, Merrick's Two-Headed Pig. Can you explain to me why this, that, and the other thing happened? And you should have just seen their jaws drop, because they've known me for 39 years and I've never asked these questions before.
Yeah.
So what's your problem with CAFOs? What's so bad about them?
Well, I also have family, that works with soybeans and corn, and close friends who own CAFOs. But my biggest problem with them is that the research and promotional tools used to support meat that comes out of a CAFO, I don't feel like it's telling an honest story about the number of inputs required to get those animals to market, and I want the data to just tell a more honest story. Also, I think that raising a pig or a cow indoors for its whole lifetime necessarily leads to negative health, just as if children were kept indoors for their entire lifetime with little exercise and little access to sunlight. You've got a weakened immune response. So I think those would be my main gripes with CAFOs.
Now, I guess we probably should have said this at the beginning, but it doesn't hurt to say it now. Your research and your book is based off of, and correct me if I'm wrong, your father's notes that he's taken over the last 20 years as a veterinarian, correct?
Correct, yeah. So he's almost worked for 4 decades, but he's been hung up on certain issues for the last several, and most of the book focuses on animal feed problems and the animal feed that's being fed to animals raised on CAFOs, but also large farms that aren't considered CAFOs are covered or coated, I shouldn't say covered, coated with certain pesticide residues, and he has been trying to put together enough evidence that he can talk more wisely about the ways he observes these feeds affecting animals' health overall. So I wanted to take his notes and put it into context in a way that made more sense than oftentimes him just sharing a bit of his frustration, and people kind of going, what are all these big words you're talking about? So that was why I wrote the book.
And so where do you and your dad differ the most, would you say? I mean, CAFOs is one thing, he's focusing more on just genetically altered foods and feed of itself. Is that where you guys kind of find yourselves kind of, differing down different paths?
I think we differ in just simply what we think could be possible for the future. I don't think we have a lot of differences when it comes to the science. He's aware that vitamin D deficiency's been a problem in CAFOs. He's also concerned about the way this feed is affecting animals in CAFOs. But I think he thinks that it's unrealistic of me to think that we can feed as many people as we need to meat without CAFOs. So
okay.
He's trying to do his best within that context.
Okay.
And I'm currently living in Massachusetts, where I've lived for the last decade, and I'm trying to make sense of this area where thousands and thousands of people are buying meat that's not raised in CAFOs, and it's in a relatively population-dense area. Not that that's feeding all of Massachusetts, certainly not. But I'm just seeing more locally grown, locally raised meat vendors in general in this area, even though it's such a packed zone. So
I thought that was a really good point in your book too. You came from, what's considered kind of America's breadbasket. Iowa's about as good as you can get when it comes to soil to farm on, and yet you feel like you're seeing more of the non-CAFO kind of stuff in a smaller area where you are. I remember that part of the book that kind of stuck with me pretty good. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, like your background? Where did you go to school? Did you go into science in college, or what? Kind of like, can you give us a little quick bio about, where you've been, what you're doing, and then that can lead us into more conversations about the book.
Sure. I was a biology English double major, and I originally thought I either wanted to go pre-med or do some kind of scientific journalism, and ended up falling in love with the guy while working for the Appalachian Mountain Club in New Hampshire, and continued to do that job during summers, like an outdoor conservation-y job, and then decided I wasn't really wanting the lifestyle of, say, a doctor, and decided that science teaching might be more up my alley. And both he and I went to the University of Massachusetts for grad school. Then just one thing led to another. I ended up getting a job in this area, and so did he. And 8 years later, here I am, teaching middle school science in New England.
Now, your book is called America's Two-Headed Pig, and reading your book, I know why you named it that, but why don't you tell our listeners how and why you came up with that title for your book?
I came up with that title because every time I sat around my family listening to them debate various agriculture topics, I would start to think about a two-headed pig that my father brought home when I was in first grade. And this pig had two heads, and we were charged with feeding it. But every time it attempted to eat, just as one of its mouths would try to meet the bottle or the feed, the other mouth would decide that it needed the very same thing. So it never achieved its goal of nourishing itself. And I sometimes, when looking at American agriculture, think that all of the heads influencing American farms are confused like that, and we press policies that help large farmers and operations but hurt small, diverse farms, and then fail to really truly nourish ourselves in a healthier way out of the system. We jeopardize our natural resources in the process, and really food security hasn't improved all that much in our nation, despite what sometimes the ag media proclaims, since the 1990s. So.
Well, and I was telling Matt earlier when we started chatting before we got on the podcast, I was always under the assumption that I didn't have to think about my food. I remember thinking that way as a kid, and that I just assumed the food I was buying or the food I was being given was good for me.
That is at least not hurting you.
At least it's not hurting me. And so it kind of, as I get older, and I hate to say I get too cynical, but when it comes to food, and again, I'm being from Iowa like you, it's one of those things where it's like you really feel like, from somebody from here who, Matt and I do a lot of, buying things from farmers markets when it's, in the summertime and things like that. We know good food. And so I wonder, can you put a finger on, can you think of a time when it seems like food just kind of changed? How about your childhood? You grew up on a farm. You probably had lots of fruits and vegetables and things like that. At what point do you feel like it kind of changed and it became to the point where we now have to really start looking into who's making what and who's doing what to what, because otherwise we're going to be fed something that might be really detrimental to our health?
Or is it even possible for us who don't live around organic farms like what you might have, is it possible for us to go to the grocery store and not purchase nutrient depleted food?
I think it's possible. I think you have to know what you're looking for and be aware of what's in these foods. I personally try to avoid foods that contain a lot of corn syrup, and if I skirt around the edges of, say, a grocery store where the fresh produce is, I do a better job than if I get hung up in the aisles as far as heavily processed foods. But yeah, I think there are definite supply issues. That was an irony back to living in Massachusetts versus living in Iowa. I just found it so frustrating that I came from this area that's so proud of its agriculture, and then I get out here and I find there's so many more opportunities to buy fresh produce. And I'm thinking, well, this doesn't make sense. I grew up in a major agricultural state. Where is the diversity of what I should be eating? And the truth now is that in Iowa, we pretty much focus on 2 crops that we don't even eat, and yet we proclaim we're feeding the world. And I find that infuriating. We talk as though we're raising corn and soybeans to feed the world, and really we're raising them to fuel cars and feed cows and pigs and make corn syrup. But as I've tricked some adults out here, you can't take a bite of seed corn and enjoy it.
Right.
It's not like you can eat this stuff.
There's a movie, a documentary. You and I just watched it, Todd.
The Corn Kings?
No.
Or King Corn?
No.
Oh, King Corn. Yeah, it's really
that was a great one.
There is that, but the one with the cow, it's got the label. It's got the scanner label on the cow.
Oh, Food Inc.
Food Inc. And it talks about.
I haven't seen that yet.
I thought it was a really great documentary. It shows how many of the foods that we eat that are in the grocery stores that you think have nothing to do with corn, but because they break the corn down to the molecular level, down to its enzymes, and then they reprogram it, and then they use them in different foods, and then build up these completely artificial foods. So it's like, I know what you're saying about this idea, this message that they're saying, well, we feed the world. Well, it looks like all this corn is actually going towards fuel and cattle and things like that. But in a way, when they break down this corn kernel and we get the high fructose corn syrup, and I know it's not that good for us, but in a way they are funneling that crappy part of the corn back to us in all these different food products throughout the supermarket.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess it depends on what you want to be putting in your body, but there are a lot of reasons why doctors are arguing that it's not a healthy thing to eat in large amounts, maybe in moderation, but certainly we don't want to see people eating it in all of their products, all of their food products.
One thing I'm not sure about, I don't know if you have this answer or not, but this sweet corn you get in the summertime around Iowa, a kid with the pickup truck on the side of the road kind of thing. Are those GMO corns usually? I just popped in my head. I'm just wondering, because that's the corn. You were talking about us not being able to eat corn, and I thought, the really only corn you can go buy and eat is sweet corn in the summertime. But I wonder if
how do you even know if that's GMO corn?
Right. I wonder if that's GMO corn. Is it because it's extra sweet? They've done something else to it to make it super sweet? I'm just curious.
Good question. I generally eat the sweet corn that's been raised by, say, my brother or people I know, and I know you can certainly grow non-genetically modified sweet corn. I don't currently know if there is a genetically modified variety, but
we'll see.
That is one thing I'm so proud of, because the sweet corn in Iowa is so much better than the sweet corn I've had anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I'll be very bummed if genetically modified sweet corn takes over.
Well, I also wanted to ask you, this kind of went back to what you said earlier about, you knowing people that, farm. And I know somebody who farms and they do pigs. And she was talking to me. I don't eat a lot of pork. And so I was talking about having turkey sausage with my kids or something. And she said, and so why don't you eat pork? And I just said, there's a lot of antibiotics and, meat and all these kind of things. And she and her husband is a pork farmer, and she just railed me about all the things that they have to go through that the USDA makes sure that they don't have. So like, if we have one pig that's tested with a certain amount of antibiotic in it, they scrap the whole entire truck of pigs. So they can't be over medicated. They can't have too much antibiotics in it. And so that's
something that I think my dad would be honest about is, well, maybe when they're tested they can't, but the amount of input, it's another area where I think we need to be more honest about how much input is going into these facilities, because it is a lot more than it used to be. Pigs are given a lot more antibiotics than they used to be, and without them, they couldn't be raised in these closed quarters, which can lead to all kinds of other issues with their guts and how they feel and how they are able to respond to the environment around them. So maybe during the USDA test, they're not showing antibiotic residues, but certainly lots of antibiotics are being used. People put antibiotics in feed and water regularly in these units. I find the conversation sometimes a little frustrating because people get offended if you say, I don't eat this type of meat for this reason. Well, if that's what they raise, that's their livelihood. And
right.
So, sometimes just saying something like that can prevent a conversation from happening.
Todd had told me a story where he was speaking to a farmer, and they were telling him about how they don't eat their own produce. I mean, they don't eat their own livestock because of they know exactly what they're putting into their cows. Correct?
Yeah. She said that they can't not feed these cows antibiotics because I can't remember. She's a pretty conscious person, so I don't want to misquote her, but it had something to do with the land that the cows are farmed on, where if it's super wet, there's a lot of moisture, and they get some kind of like hoof disease. Mm-hmm. And so they have to give them more antibiotics just to make sure they don't get sick, because they usually do from this field. And so she said that they don't eat their own cows, that she buys cows from a friend down the street that has, grass raised, no antibiotics, cows. And I just thought it was kind of ironic because she's super conscious of this kind of stuff. And yet the cow she's raising, she feels like she has to make sure that, because they, whatever this disease is, will wipe them out, and they're out their money and they can't, earn a living, so to speak. And so I just thought it was very ironic, the conversation.
And I don't want to pigeonhole or say that all farmers are like that. Hey, they know what they're putting in their feed, but they don't want to eat what they're producing. Because I do have family that, like I said, raise cattle. And when I spoke to him about this upcoming podcast and about the book that you had written, he's a very thoughtful person. He was sitting there thinking about he was listening to what I was saying, and he said, "Now listen, I don't produce anything that I'm not willing to eat. I would not go out of my way to put something in these cows that are going to harm the people that are eating it. But this is what we're being shown how to farm. Farming has changed so much from what I gathered, from what he said and how I took it. Farming has changed. The education of farming has changed. All the different practices that farmers go through to actually be competitive in today's market has changed. So when I was asking him, do you use GMO feed? What kind of feed do you use? All this stuff. Do you use CAFOs? And he said, I do what I have to do to stay competitive. And also, I'm doing what whoever's who do farmers look at for the latest and greatest information? Do they read like Farmers not the Farmers Almanac, like a farming magazine, or are they being misled? Are they being miseducated?
Well, that was my primary concern in writing the book. I wanted to look at how various publications are talking about these things, and another parallel I drew to America's two-headed pig, just the two-headed way we discuss these contentious issues related to agriculture. My dad gets all kinds of publications, one called Feedstuffs, an international agribusiness publication. He gets Horse Dairyman, American Pork Producer, and it's a totally different jargon that's used in a lot of these publications than the average person would use for certain things. For example, in many articles I saw genetically modified crops called crop protection, and that includes businesses. I guess we have a business just outside the town where I grew up called Crop Protection Services, and another one called Innovative Ag Services, where basically the business is selling genetically modified seeds and chemicals used on these seeds. And this is a language that farmers, I think, sometimes use too. We're protecting our crops with this technology, and it sounds all very positive. A very different take on it than I think the consumer is reading about in other publications. So I certainly wouldn't have associated crop protection, though I can see why that somehow makes sense with genetic engineering. I wouldn't be calling them the same thing, but that's how it is discussed.
Well, it seems really shady. I mean, why would you not want to have crop protection? You don't want this? How come you don't want? It's almost like the No Child Left Behind or Clean Air Act. It's like you give it a label and you're just like, well, come on. Yeah. You're not being very honest. I mean, are you giving me crop protection, or are you just making sure that I keep buying your seed? Do you think one of the downfalls of this is Iowa still has more family farms per capita in the state than any other state in the nation, which is surprising because we keep hearing about small farms being bought out by larger farms, because they keep talking about, powerful farming and biotech companies are banding together right now to see if they can influence this GMO labeling. They feel like GMO labeling is going to happen anyways, and so they're now trying to band together to see if they can have some influence on what is talked about in these GMO labels, what it applies to, all those kind of things. Do you feel like the shrinking family farm being bought up by large agricultural companies is one of the reasons why these things aren't as talked as much? Because you would think that if, excuse the term, Farmer Bob's down the road and he hears about it from his kid who's in college, and he tells his next door neighbor, hey, we don't want to buy this seed anymore because it's doing this, this, and this, and you get a small band of farmers together say, hey, we're not going to buy this seed anymore, we're going to buy this other seed. You would think you'd have an easier way to battle some of these issues, unless everybody's owned by one big corporation, then they can do whatever they want.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really hard to be picky about anything when there's only one market left, or only a few farmers left in an area, and they're all farming one crop. Vested interest leads to, I think, misleading information, and everybody wants to be proud of what they do, so it's a lot easier to tell yourself that you're protecting your crop and feeding the world than to look at the negatives involved. If you looked at the negatives every day, how would you keep going about your work.
Right, and I guess I want to say it was Food Inc. Yeah, it was in the trailer for Food Inc. where I think a farmer said, if people want this stuff, we're farmers. We'll give the public whatever they want. If this is what they want, we'll give it to them. And I wonder if those small voices are being kind of squashed out because, they're saying now that, in facts and by numbers, absolute majority of Americans want GMO foods labeled on their what they're consuming. They want to have it. So at what point is it not going to happen because we're demanding it? But again, if you have, ag corporations now are up there with like pharmaceutical companies. They're so big and they produce so much grain for ethanol, which leads into a whole nother gamut, and then in ag business, when it comes to large animal breeding, hogs and pigs confinement, that's isn't that above and beyond by itself a huge thing?
I think all of those are issues. I think we just passed another farm bill where we reduced traditional subsidies, but we put in place an insurance on corn and soybeans that would be very hard for any farmer who's currently farming corn and soybeans to refuse. And got an 80% or greater kind of profit guarantee. That's awesome.
Well, it's awesome.
It's awesome for that farmer. It's
Yeah.
hard to turn away from that when you don't have incentives to grow more diverse array of crops or have a more diverse array of animals on your farm.
Well, I don't want to completely knock that new farm bill down because it's ushering in
hemp farming.
Hemp farming.
Did you hear about that part of that bill, Leah?
Oh, yeah, I heard a little bit about it. I've kind of been crazy busy this week, so I didn't really have time to look into it. But
I don't think any of us could really say, "Oh yeah, I know everything that's going on with that new farm bill."
yeah, so
when a bill gets passed, you wonder, "Oh, how many thousands of pages is this, and how exactly does it affect me?" But we hear the highlights, and the thing that made me question this farm bill was the fact that there was so much popularity around hemp farming that, well, what else is in this farm bill that I'm going to regret saying, yay, let's pass that farm bill?
Right. Well, it's like she just said. I mean, why would you turn something down when it's going to benefit you? I mean, you can say, no, I'm going to turn my back on 80% of guarantee of what I'm going to grow. I mean, it almost sounds dumb, like you wouldn't do it. I mean, because you're putting in to risk your livelihood and your family's ability to eat food.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, that's such a tough. I think that's the epitome of it, though. Why is it so convoluted? Because industrial hemp is a great thing. That's what the main part of it was doing. It's allowing research for industrialized hemp. And there were other things in there with a lot of green power stuff that was promoting windmills and solar and things like that as well. Those are the things we're going to focus on. So what is being slid through there underneath the table that we don't know about?
Yeah, it seems like it's such a double-edged sword, Leah, that when I think of my family growing grain and stuff like that, and they are a small farmer, that they're one of the few small farms left in a certain area. And when I brought this up to them and recently at during the holidays, one, they were surprised I was asking about it, but two, they said, what people don't realize is the popularity for small farms is out there. And you ask anybody out there, they want small farms to be popular and they want them to exist. But the reality is, if I don't bring in X amount of bushels of grain, they won't even buy it from me. I have to hit a certain level. I have to bring in so much, or else I can't sell it. Mm-hmm. And then it completely removes small farmers from the equation.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's not tricky. I do think our government could do a better job incentivizing diversity on these farms and conservation measures. And that I do have hope that I think someday consumer pressure is going to maybe turn us back the other way a little bit. There are a lot of unknowns with genetically modified organisms. I can't even outrightly say in my book. I don't say I know for sure genetically modified organisms, including seeds and corn, are doing X damage. I talk about different studies. I mostly focus on the chemicals that they've been modified to tolerate. But I think people do want a more precautionary approach, and that the negatives of using chemicals, so many chemicals on these genetically modified crops, are becoming more widely discussed, and I think there will be more demand for them. Are farmers going to pick up on that? There's some evidence that some are. I was reading an article earlier this week about in Grant, Illinois, where demand for non-GMO corn has just shot through the roof, not only by businesses in the United States, but also international businesses that don't want to buy our GMO corn, who are taking that more precautionary approach. But there's definitely been this. Before I started writing the book, I felt like there was just such a gap in knowledge, and even in my hometown, when discussing some of these things, I couldn't believe all the people who would just say, "We're modifying the crops that are growing around us. What is it that we're spraying all over the land?" Like, people just don't seem to know, and a lot of it goes back to the wording we use. But it puts me on the defensive as an Iowan, because then there's these people from the city who do know, and they really seem to care. And I think, wow, I'm coming back to visit my family, and there are these chemicals being sprayed all around my property on neighbors' fields, and I don't have any idea what this stuff is.
Yeah.
So I wanted to educate myself.
Well, let me ask you. When I was talking to my family about this, I said, or Todd and I have had this conversation, because we had this romanticized idea, if we ever won the lottery, we wanted to build neighborhoods that were more like small communities, like small towns with a center in the middle for organic food and a place for kids to go and all this stuff. Anyway. But when we start talking about it anymore, when I think about it, I say, you know what? If in order for us to build something like that, if we were to ever come into money, we would have to take away farmland. And if we want to get away from CAFOs, if we want to get back towards free range anything, we have to stop growing outward and start growing upward. Do you think, in your opinion, because I don't know if you have the facts, the figures, the numbers, in your opinion, do we even have the land resources to have free range cattle and chickens and pigs, and not have these huge, horrible living conditions that animals are in? Because, you know, people are going to demand when they go into KFC that there's a chicken behind the counter anytime that they stop in.
Honestly, I don't think that we have that capacity. I think that people would have to cut back on the amount of certain meats they eat, and that would probably be another point at which my dad and I would start to argue in this conversation with each other. Respectfully argue, because I know even like in our church they propose things like meatless Mondays, and people have taken that as like a personal blow to what they're doing. But I think, in reality, if we want everyone to eat more grass-fed meat, then everyone's also going to have to cut back on their meat consumption. And
do you eat meat?
I do eat meat. I do. I don't eat it as frequently as I did growing up.
I was gonna say, can you be from Iowa?
Lunch, and supper.
I'm not sure if you can be from Iowa and not be a vegetarian. That'd be pretty hard pressed.
But I do eat meat probably 8 times a week, and then I really have shaken up the types of meat I eat also.
Especially now with you being pregnant again. I was going over the book again before the podcast, and I read about on the infertility chapter, and you talked about your son when he was born having stones, and it immediately got you angry. Once you found out he was okay, you got really passionate about, well, what kind of toxins are in us that we didn't know about? Can you talk a little bit about that, and how have you changed your diet personally from before your first child to now?
Well, I would say I'm a lot less trusting of the FDA and things that have been approved, and I try to steer away from crops and even vegetables I know that are heavily treated with pesticides. So I do make more of an effort to buy organic, and I do make more of an effort to buy meats that haven't been heavily processed. I'm willing to spend a little bit more money on them and eat a lesser amount per week to make it affordable. Overall, I changed my milk. I'm now drinking whole milk that has been produced by organic cattle, organically fed cattle. I shouldn't say organic cattle. Those would be a few of the things that have changed.
Because in your book, and correct me if I'm wrong, you stated that in one study, they found that over 200 industrial chemicals were found in infant umbilical cord blood, and then the number that I didn't understand was it said of the 287 that were found, 180 are linked to cancer.
Yep.
So 287 chemicals were found, 200 of which were industrial chemicals, and of the 287 that were found, 180 are linked to cancer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you went on to say 217 are toxic to the brain and nervous system, and 208 of those chemicals cause birth defects.
Yep. I want to say that was an environmental working group study, but yeah, I was appalled when I read that, and I've read other things since then. I just got done reading an article in the New Yorker. Try to read a lot of different types of things. A friend pointed this one out to me about a man who was researching atrazine, the second most widely used pesticide in the United States on crops, and he ran into several problems with Syngenta, a big ag business, because his research was showing, hey, there are a lot of things wrong with this chemical. We don't understand why the EPA continues to approve it. And in this article, they say that since the mid-1970s, the EPA has only issued restrictions on the use of 5 industrial chemicals out of more than 80,000 in the environment.
Wow.
So they're doing a great job.
What are they doing? Why do we need such a big EPA? That's
yeah, you're not kidding.
And I tend to lean toward really hearing people say there's too much regulation, but in this specific case, really, is there too much regulation?
Well,
I've added that many? That seems odd to me.
Yeah, one of our friends who's huge into economics would say the free market will work itself out.
Yeah, I don't think in this case it will.
True, I don't see it.
Whatever they need to. in this article, basically Syngenta spies on this scientist and tries to ruin his reputation, and there's lots of documentation that they did so because he was finding that atrazine affected fertility in frogs and could actually cause frogs to change sex or lose their ability to reproduce in amounts much, much smaller than those being used on crops like corn in areas like Iowa.
What I found, what caught my attention about that chapter was my wife and I have adopted 3 children because both her and I are infertile. And when I think when a couple goes through that experience, you start seeing the world a little bit differently. You start being more aware. You start seeing more. You start seeing actually how many couples are adopting now, and how much that number has grown since the last 30, 40 years. And I wonder to myself, how much of this has a direct effect with what we're eating, or is it our genetics, and that's what was predisposed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's a question my dad thinks about a lot. The 3 of the big things he was noticing on farms, big health changes, were so many more cows seemed to be losing their pregnancies, and that he also saw other veterinarians reporting on this. It wasn't just him. Yet articles put out by the industry were saying, we've improved our efficiencies in cattle by so much in the last 2 decades with our modern technology, and simultaneously he's watching their reproductive potential go downward in pretty concerning numbers. And he saw quite a few more mycotoxin issues, which he associated with either the straws that these cattle were laying in or the feed that they were eating that were also testing high in mycotoxic mold residues. And then seeing other things like deteriorating bone conditions, all of which, if they can happen to a pig or cow in just a 2-year span, you think, well, what happens to a human when they're eating these things for long amounts of time? And it's much harder to see in human beings because we eat such a complex diet, I think. And there's no real, truly scientific way to separate out all the variables. So industry will always have the argument on their side. But
it's always harder to prove a negative.
Poor job of regulating the number of chemicals that are now synthetic chemicals that are now being put or allowed to go onto food products.
And I wanted to ask you about your brother farms, correct?
Yeah, my brother, to add to interesting conversation, my dad's working on pretty conventional farms, still works for some CAFO farmers, small farms, and now the Amish have moved into Delaware County, so now he's also going to Amish farms. That was a twist of events after the book was published. And then my brother started an organic farm a few years back near Grinnell, Iowa. So we hear all different kinds of agricultural stories. And he's actually having a lot of success now.
Your brother is. Your brother is, right?
Yeah, it took him a long time to get started. He's weathered some, well, everybody has weathered some tough weather years with drought and then too much rain and then drought. But he has a pretty interesting customer base. So,
this actually, my question for this is, I've heard, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Monsanto bill, this last year was a huge year for Monsanto. whether it was good or bad, because people might hear Monsanto. When they hear Monsanto, they might think of the big bad wolf type of person, but I never see, driving through Iowa, I never see signs that say, hey, this is Monsanto seed. I don't see that. I see like Pioneer seed. I see other labels, and which are offshoot, correct, right, of Monsanto?
Yes.
Okay.
How about Bayer? Is Bayer just another company like Monsanto that owns seeds or farms? Do you know? Because I see Bayer quite a bit. Of course, I relate it to aspirin, but I see the Bayer's name on a lot of commercials and a lot of signage.
Yes, it's another big ad business. I would associate Bayer, Syngenta, Monsanto, DuPont. Those are names in the top 6 as far as size goes for major agribusinesses.
My question about your brother and his organic farm is this year there was a ruling by a judge saying that if there is a farmer that is organic, and there's a farm next to his farm that has Monsanto seed, wind picks up, blows the pollen from one farm to the other farm. Now your brother has Monsanto seed pollinated crops. Now he has to pay Monsanto because now his crops are genetically modified. Does that type of worry enter into his way of thinking for farming? And if a biplane is spraying the neighbor's fields with chemicals and they mess up and they accidentally spray his farm, how long does that affect his farm? How before he can register as being organic again?
That does affect his scene. I know he worries and pays great attention to where crop dusters are flying, because if he should be sprayed, then he has to remove that field or vegetable production zone for, I think it's a couple of years. Don't quote me on that, but several years before he can claim that it's organic again.
Is he compensated for anything like that? I mean, if somebody burnt his field down, which is literally what they're doing if they accidentally spray it, would they be liable for that?
I think he could try, but does he have enough money to attempt to get compensation? Probably not.
That's really shitty.
That's really the problem, though, isn't it? I mean, when you say, hey, the free market will fix itself, and hey, things will all work out. If you don't have the money to take it to court, it's not gonna ever work out. And if you're fighting somebody who has unlimited money to defend itself or to tie things up in the court system, it's of no use, and all it's going to do is stress you out, and you're going to become broke.
Yeah.
What can your brother? He's been
a huge advocate lately to go along with that. The insurance programs available for someone like him trying to go organic. Here he's got amazing demand. Consumers are wanting his vegetable products more and more. He's able to produce awesome vegetables on a relatively small piece of land. But there isn't really a good insurance system for people who do want to grow a diverse amount of crops on their land. And to pay for what's being offered to corn and bean farmers, well, it just doesn't make sense for him. Because it would never... What he's making off such a few amount of acres would never be made up for by the premiums and insurance. They're not going to pay him out as much as he would need when natural disaster strikes. And he's seen that with previous drought, and it's been a huge worry. So here we are insuring farmers that just farm one crop, and we're not doing a good job insuring farmers that are producing a diverse array of foods on their farms. It's frustrating to him.
I would think that if I was an organic farmer, I would have a lot of sleepless nights Because it would
I
take
think he has.
It would take one mistake. It would take one mistake by a biplane.
A lot of interesting stories from him too.
So is your father seen, I'm assuming the Amish farms that he goes to, are they meat producing as well?
Some. I know he's seen some pigs. He's seen some goats. That's all I'm aware of, but I haven't talked to him. He's been to more farms recently than what he was, say, at 6 months ago.
Okay. Are they organic, do you know?
Goes. Interestingly, I don't think they are 100% organic, though I'm still learning about how the Amish farm.
Sure.
I think they can use pesticides with certain permissions, but I need to investigate that further. I've been super surprised just to see when I wrote the book, really not that many small farms in our county, and the Amish have come in by quite large numbers now.
Well, and Iowa farms aren't cheap. I mean, it's $1 million for 100 acres still. I wonder where they're coming in from. I mean, good for them, but I wonder where they're coming in from.
I was actually hoping that Leah was going to say, yeah, my dad has gone to these Amish farms and their livestock are super healthy right. And everything's organic. Because if I think of a group of people that are living the most, I hate to say holistic, is that the right
That's good.
term? The most natural way would be the Amish with the no electricity. I know there's different sects of.
Actually, it's kind of weird. The Amish across the road from my parents, we've got Amish people that bought the home across the road. They opened a Dent and Bent store, so now you can walk across the road to an Amish Dent and Bent store and buy Starbucks singles packets that are about to expire. You can buy like a lot of heavily processed, outdated products at this Amish Dent and Bent store.
I was going to say there's a Dent and Bent store in Kelowna, Iowa, I think, too, that I hear people talk about.
You both are freaking me out.
People love it.
I've never heard of a Dent and Bent store.
You can get everything super cheap. It literally has dents or it has a bend in it, or it's like she said, it's going to be expire. You know, the hard part too about canned goods as I'm discovering is that they're coated with plastic on the inside of the metal. I think, and it's plastic that's not. It's the stuff that has the BPA in it that everybody's trying to get away from. All of them have it. They all have it. So if you're going to buy a dent or bent can of green beans and it's old, it's been sitting in plastic for an awfully long time. So I mean, that's kind of what I'm all for saving a buck. Trust me.
All my prepper friends are freaking out right now, thinking about all their canned foods. It's going to be toxic to eat.
Well, hey, does your brother? Does he have a name? What's the name of his farm? Can we promote it and let people know about it?
Grinnell Heritage Farm, and right outside Grinnell. So it sells an array of vegetables, tomatoes, lettuces, kale, both to market, and now I think he has a deal with the co-op in Iowa City.
Oh, we love the co-op in Iowa City.
Yeah, and I think he's doing carrots with Whole Foods, which I heard a rumor that a Whole Foods may be opening in Des Moines or Ames, maybe Des Moines. Right now, the one he's working with, I think, is based out of Omaha, so it's a little ways to send your vegetables.
Yeah, he's on the other side of Des Moines next to us, so that is a long ways to go.
It does seem crazy to me that in Iowa, there's only a few whole food markets.
Well, we have a Trader Joe's in Des Moines, and supposedly we have a Trader Joe's that's coming to somewhere in the Iowa City, Cedar Rapids area. Have you been to the Nubo Market in Cedar Rapids yet?
No,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure last time you were back in Iowa, but it's the new Bohemian area of Cedar Rapids that they kind of got a lot of FEMA money to revamp areas that were flooded out, and so they do an incredible farmers market all summer long. And in the wintertime, you can once in a while hit some really good produce, but it's kind of far and few between, unfortunately. But they have a really great meat market there, Big Boy Meats, that I buy a lot of my meat from, and he buys it from a lot of lockers around eastern Iowa, but it's all grass-fed, organic, hormone-free meats you can buy there. So it seems like Cedar Rapids in particular, and I know Iowa City has always had the co-op. I mean, the co-op's been there for forever. It seems like they're trying to have more diverse stuff. And the produce, I have not bought produce from the New Bow Market yet, but supposedly it's a local farmer that does the same thing, that he brings in produce and sells it on the weekends and things like that. So it seems like there's some things around here, but I don't know. I'm one of those people that I love Cedar Rapids as it's my home city, but man, we're blue collar. I mean, I want to say the co-op in Iowa City tried to open a store here in Cedar Rapids 10 years ago, and it just flopped.
Yeah.
When they had nobody buy anything from it. So Iowa City is more
I've been accused of being cheap often as a Massachusetts resident, and I think, I'm cheap? No, you haven't. In Iowa, I don't think I would be considered cheap. But sometimes I feel that way when I'm at home shopping for food. It's like all of a sudden I revert to this. I got to cut out my 10 coupons, and can I save 10 cents when I go shopping with my mom?
Well, hey, we
real strong mentality towards saving every penny you can on your food.
Well, Matt's been mocking me for a couple days now because I dropped $500 this weekend grocery shopping for my family, and that usually lasts about 2 to 3 weeks.
Thank you.
2 to 3 weeks, and the reason why it cost me a lot of money was that I tried my best to go as organic and, like you said, shopping around the edges of the grocery store instead of the middle. My kids love Annie's macaroni and cheese, so that's one processed food that I buy on a regular basis. It seems like I was thinking about it today because on my way, I stopped at home before I came over to Matt's house to do the podcast, and I opened my fridge to get something to eat really quick before I ran out the door. And my refrigerator looks empty to me. It looks, I mean, I can see a lot of light when I can see,
thinking,
and I'm like, I just spent, that was 6 days ago. And so if I'm going to buy things that are good, first of all, they don't last a lot of fresh produce doesn't necessarily sit in your fridge great for a long time anyways. But it's just kind of a bummer that things are, if I could fill my pantry with a bunch of horrible, horrible stuff that would last me forever and cost me, pennies to the dollar. But if I want to have things that are good for me in my refrigerator, it's going to cost me an arm and a leg. And I'd be all about buying your brother's produce, but I know it's probably going to be more expensive than I can buy, in a Target or a Hy-Vee produce store.
Yep, it's true. It's true. I'm not sure if they're doing this out in Iowa yet, but so where I am living, there's a lot of WIC. There's a lot of subsidies for things at farmers markets, and even because there's so many more local options, I can buy a whole summer share that's going to bring in tons of vegetables every week from a farm down the road for, I think it's $500, but when you divide the payment up between months, it's enough to feed my family just off vegetables, and it's not more than $100 a week, which is pretty cheap compared to what you can get in the supermarket.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
So I feel really great to have that option. Plus, there's my garden. But yeah, it's not cheap. And again, maybe another irony: this local produce that doesn't need chemicals is more expensive than produce that does have a lot of chemical and input associated with it. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up subsidies because I wanted you to kind of explain. I don't truly fully understand what it means to be subsidized or when a farmer is getting subsidies. I know you put in your book that there's a renewable fuel standard or the ethanol mandate, and you say that this costs U.S. taxpayers billions of dollars because the government pays farmers 45 cents a gallon to produce renewable corn fuel.
Yeah.
So when we were talking earlier about how farmers are getting this guarantee from the government, don't worry about it. You're not going to lose out on money. You're going to make money because of this, what we put in this new farm bill. That is directly coming out of the tax money that we pay into the government, correct?
Yeah. Yep. So we subsidize, now we'll be subsidizing, I guess, and we have been for the last few years, insurance premiums in greater amounts. So, like partially free insurance on crops, on monoculture crops, where the greatest danger is losing your whole crop.
And what's a monoculture crop?
A monoculture crop, it's driving down the road in Iowa and seeing thousands of acres of corn, just one cultured crop, mono.
Okay.
So that's like all you're farming. You're farming one crop, or maybe you're farming two crops, versus a polyculture.
And you say that because of these subsidies and because of these farm bills, it's creating a pride-based tension between remaining animal farmers and farmers whose sole industry is commodity crop production?
Yeah, I make that argument, and I think that tension is there. I think if you are raising corn and beans, and you have this pretty extensive insurance coverage, and you're farming seasonally, that's a lot of stress off your back versus waking up super early in the morning to go take care of your cows that do have some insurance, but not to the same extent, especially if disease, infects your herd. Got to worry about disease. You got to worry about more demanding schedule. We've lost a lot of our livestock farmers in Iowa, and so again, it's caused me to hesitate even criticizing people who are still in the CAFO business, because that's where they were pressured to go, and there are few people remaining. They had to be proud to stay with it. And yeah, I think it's created a pride-based tension between remaining animal farmers, and I've heard comments under breath at various farms about porch farmers, people who sit on their porch most of the day during the summer, and then they're very busy during harvest and chemical application time, and various times of the year, but it's not as much work, frankly, is what they're saying.
Well, and I think part of the problem too that I gathered from your book is it seems like farmers now have to get so much yield, per acre, but in turn that yield, because of the seed they're using, isn't nutrient dense, and so when they take that and they feed it to baby pigs who are 10 days off of being weaned from their mothers, and they cannot get what they need to survive because this feed doesn't have the nutrients that it should have, it just sounds like a horribly vicious cycle that so it's like, okay, so we have to keep on yielding more, but yet the food doesn't have the nutrition it's supposed to, and yet now they call this post-weaning failure to thrive syndrome, right?
Yeah, this had about 5 different names in the last 2 decades. That's one of them.
Well, it just seems silly. In other words, they're not getting the nutrients they need. So why would? It doesn't seem like a stretch to say, okay, so what we're feeding the baby pigs is not nutrient enough, and so instead of me continuing to lose money by losing pigs, I'm going to find another crop that I could feed them, knowing that they're going to survive, or I'm going to make, I'm going to save money. If I'm going to think of it as like a money saving situation, why would I not want to save money by finding a feed that I know is going to make sure I don't have as many piglets die?
Yeah, it's very convoluted. My dad takes it personally when he hears people gripe about animal agriculture, and he thinks, well, geez, a lot of my problems are stemming from the way these crops are raised, and nobody's griping about that. So I think in the back of his mind, he would like to show through his observations and recordings, how plant monocultures, these giant ag monocultures, and the changing practices related to them are affecting pig and cattle health.
Well, we really would like to meet him at some point. Maybe if you sign off and say the podcast is something that you enjoyed doing, and you can talk to him and say, these guys are interested in at least very very simply understanding his point of view and the things that he's struggled with, or the things that he thinks are going well as well. We'd love to have him on the podcast. I love having.
There's nothing more entertaining than like an old farmer type dude who just is a hardworking fella.
Yeah, I will talk to him again. He's doing more talks. Like I said, there's just been more and more interest in this subject, and he was hesitant to talk to people at first, I think, because he's still a working veterinarian in this field, but I think been doing more talks around the country, and we were invited to China this summer. I'm not going because I will be in the midst of breastfeeding, and I'm not really psyched about taking an infant to Beijing, one of the most polluted cities in the world
you're not
right
kidding.
now.
Well,
but he's probably going to go and speak there to a group of veterinarians who are concerned about similar things in China.
Well, I thought it was interesting. I just saw a thing on, I think it was in April of 2013. There was a big thing that hit like the Daily Beast and Huffington Post and the New York Times of this two-headed pig that was in China. And today I just decided to Google America's two-headed pig again to see kind of what other things popped up, if there's anything more recent. And that was on there. And I thought they kind of made a big deal out of it because, what some weird thing is happening to China and their meat products, And I was like, so they don't realize that it happens here as well. And it could very, very well be an anomaly. I'm sure that there have been two-headed animals throughout the history, but I would think that it was just kind of odd to me that here we're talking about this off of a book that you based off of an animal that you saw as a child, and yet just this last year, people are making a big stink about the fact that there's a two-headed pig in China that was born.
Well, the thing that I'm glad that you guys actually brought this up, and it's cool that your dad's going to go to China to have this conversation, because in a previous podcast, I had brought up the fact that China now has fake eggs. And
I've read about that.
You have read about this. Okay, so it's completely chemical based. It's completely synthesized. They make it. I think it even has a shell around it so that it gives the appearance and the feel of a real egg, but it has nothing to do with coming out of a chicken. And again, this kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Was, do you think that we just have maybe too many people? Do they have enough chickens? Obviously, they don't have enough chickens to even get enough eggs.
That's just China.
In China,
right?
So that fear, when I see that in China, I look back towards ourselves and I think, okay, we're not as population dense as China, but could we get to that point if we don't start looking at the problems that other countries are falling into? And when you see that a country has to make completely synthetic eggs, it scares the hell out of me. So it's great that your dad's going there and that they're actually concerned about it and they want to be educated on possibly a healthier way to grow their livestock.
Yeah, I think that quite a few people are concerned over there about it, and I've been in contact with some of the folks my dad's been participating in research with throughout the past 5 years. As I try to figure out a path to regulate and more properly monitor some of these large farms that have sprouted up in China now. It's a lot of the problems they're having are parallel to problems we've had 10 years ago. Loss of small farmers moving to the city, ag businesses taking hold, and even interest in buying American businesses. I know that this year, I'm forgetting, I think it was Smithfield, there was some kind of merger proposed between China and the United States related to meat that caused a stir at the governmental level because debating about how do we internationally regulate the sale of meat and the exchange of meat products. Not something that can be done easily.
Well, especially if the issues with China have been that not just the non-regulation, but what's in it. They had the whole toothpaste scare that had a bunch of crap in toothpaste. So are they going to be able to? Is a Chinese company going to buy Smithfield and then sell everybody, hey, Smithfield meat? But no, it's shipped over from China, and we don't know what's in it or what it has, what it's made up of. And if they're already making synthetic eggs.
It all started with lead-based paint on toys. Remember that? Remember that big scare?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think I want to buy any meat that comes in from China.
Maybe we're just setting up
I think I'll pass on that. Somebody else can do it.
Maybe we're just setting up a situation where we get scared completely of all these other countries' produce, so that we produce everything at home. Maybe that's where we're going with this. No?
To me, it wouldn't be a bad thing to start over. Why not hit the reset button and start farming in a way that's sustainable for our population? Not that I don't care about other people in the world, but if we can start farming like Leah's saying in Massachusetts, where a smaller plot of land is able to feed more people, and yet we live in Iowa, which has got hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland, why not start over again? And start farming in a way where it's sustainable, it's got better nutrients, and then you can start expanding slowly from there instead of it being this humongous money-making driving machine where it really is funded by high fructose corn syrup, corn and soybean feed for animals, and ethanol.
Well, you take me, a big dummy, for example. I need to be taken by the hand, Leah, and shown exactly how to change my life. I need somebody that has a very powerful personality and is willing to deal with me to change my point of view and to have a paradigm shift. And who do farmers have for that? Who can we point to and say, hey, if you're a farmer and you're not happy with your lot in life, you're not happy with what's going on around you, and you want to sever these ties and get back to a more healthy way of farming, but hey, 1 or 2 generations have already gone by, and this is all they know. All they know is to spray chemicals on their crops. They have no other idea how to farm.
Yeah.
Who do we point to? How do we show farmers a better way to farm?
Well, I do think that this, some people call it a food movement, has to be led by consumers and demand in our country, because without that there, I think the risks and stakes are really high for farmers, and some people can afford to change and some people can't. And I'm pretty realistic about that. There's got to be markets that will buy more produce and more diverse produce and make that a priority before there are tons of farmers growing these new crops and more diverse crops on their land. I'd like to be able to say that everybody could just change, but I think there needs to be more consumer-driven demand, and also, and which that we're seeing, but it needs to continue, and also things like insurance that encourages diversity instead of monoculture overall.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna say that that's a wonderful place to stop. We've had you on the phone for a little while now.
Are you getting tired?
Yeah,
Is the baby kicking?
Geez, Louis, the baby's kicking. She needs a nap. She needs somebody to feed her. Come on. Get off the phone. Jeez Louise. Well, hey, listen, we can't thank you enough for being on. It's been a long time coming, but the good part was that it built up. It was like Christmas morning. You're so excited, and it's just got a chance to draw out.
Thank you for having me, and I hope you guys have a nice night.
Definitely.
Did you have a good time?
Sounds like you have no problem conversing with each other.
Oh, we love the sound of each other's voices, so we should be pretty good there.
Leah, I hope that in the future you wouldn't mind coming back on and talking with us again, maybe with your father. And is there any hope for a Two-Headed Pig Part 2? A sequel to this book?
Geez. I don't know. I think, I like teaching. I think my writing projects will be sporadic, and I think as soon as I have this second baby, I will not be writing very frequently based on my experiences having a toddler in the house and being a pregnant teacher.
Hey, thanks so much again. We really enjoyed ourselves.
Okay, me too. Thanks for calling.
Dude, that was a good time.
That Leah Dunham. She can wear a man out. She's a talker.
That was good.
Yeah.
That's good. I think the more we have people that are a wealth of knowledge in the area that they are passionate about. We can talk about Eric Klenick for Sauce Hockey, passionate about it, so it's successful. She's passionate about something like this, so she writes a book, and look at she gets asked to go to China. I just think when
her father's being asked to go to China,
right? They both were. She said that they both were asked, and she couldn't. Right. She can't go because she's pregaruni. So right. I just think
pregaruni.
I think that when you're passionate about something, it draws people in. It just does. So it's a constant thing we've bumped into on this, whether it's Chuck in the cuffs or it's Keone in the jiu-jitsu, you name it. When people are passionate about it, they're not in it to make $1 million. They're not in it to reap anything other than enjoyment from their art or what it is that interests them, and that's what draws people to them. You know what I mean? Again, we've talked about how my introduction to Leah was from a family member who just said, "Oh, hey, have you heard about this vet? They wrote a book called this," and then that was it. And we got a hold of her, and it worked out. So I just think that things that happen like this are serendipitous.
Oh, nice word.
Of people being passionate about what they love.
Who enjoys words like that?
Leah Dunham.
Well, I was going to say English majors.
Yeah, in parentheses, Leah Dunham.
In parentheses, Leah Dunham. Air quotes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that I would be remiss if I didn't say this. The only thing I was a little sad about, not really disappointed, just kind of sad. No, maybe disappointed. Whatever. Pick a word. I'm gonna go disappointed, Alex. Disappointed for 400. Is the fact that there's really no hard data, black and white, right and wrong. This is what's causing the problems,
right?
That, and there's no hard answers. There's nobody out there that says I'm an expert farmer in this category, and if you want to change things around, I'm going to help you. I'm going to break it down. This is exactly how you do it.
No definitive answers to give you a good direction to go to.
No, but the great thing about this podcast and about Leah's book is that it brings more awareness. You're constantly needing that refresher of what you need to be aware of. And, if you weren't aware of it, open your eyes. Hello, good morning. Come up for a breath of fresh air. This is what you need to be looking at. And I think all farmers want what we want, which is just, at the end of the day, to feel like they put forth a great effort. They work their butts off all day long.
Right.
And they're proud of the work that they've done. And they're holding on to their family's farm that they've had for a long time, or they've thought of doing nothing but farming since they were a kid. And, I really feel like farmers are getting beat up in the media lately. And I think there's a lot of farmers that are like, hey, what did I do to get beat up?
Right.
I didn't do anything to deserve this. I'm doing what my industry is telling me is the best thing for me to do. And I'm barely getting by, or I'm the other farmer.
Right.
I'm the other farmer with thousands and thousands of acres that are living high on the hog and getting or buying brand new farming equipment all the time,
Right.
That's my limited perception. That's what I see. I see either the small farmer who's working his ass off and is getting villainized, or the large farmer who's just raking in the cash.
Right. And I hadn't heard, would she call that at the end there, porch farmer, or somebody who just sits on the porch and is only there doing You're right. It can be convoluted because you think if somebody has put in the time and the energy to, most people who are, I guess I would assume that a partridge farmer is somebody who had a farm, who was doing well. They gave them the opportunity to acquire more farms. And then that just kind of like snowballed into the effect. So now they can be porch farmers. I don't think an ag business person would be sitting on a porch if they're a big money making behemoth. This guy obviously is a farmer, but maybe he's acquired farms to a point where he can be relaxed and not have to work so hard because he's put the time in, bought more farms. And when it comes to the free market and it comes to businesses, I own a yogurt store, and so I make enough money and I'm successful enough that I buy all the yogurt stores in town. And so now they're all mine. And then I branch out to the next town. I buy that yogurt store and it becomes mine. And I have done a good job of marketing and growing my brand.
Running that business, yeah.
And running that business. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing or detrimental. Now, that then takes me back to the idea of what you've talked about with some of your family members. If we could find another way to farm, we would. Or Food Inc., the farmer saying, listen, the people demanded it, we'll provide what they want from us, But if the system is pretty much rigged so that, like you said, if you're not making a certain yield, we're not even going to buy from you, well, there's your livelihood, and how can you feed a family? How can you survive if you're not fitting into what they've put into the mold?
How can you say that as America we are supporting small farmers if the grain elevator and I could be, maybe I'm misquoting, maybe I'm using the wrong term, isn't willing to take anything that you're willing to sell him?
Right.
It's a touchy subject, and there's people that I know that do a wonderful job, and there's really amazing people that work their asses off every day. And the sad part is, like in the documentary Food Inc., when they are interviewing the woman who is a chicken farmer, and she says, basically, I don't own my farm anymore. One of those top 5 food producers owns my farm. I own it, but I have a contract with these people. And if they tell me I have to change my farming, I have to change it, which means I have to spend a ton of money revamping my whole process, my whole farm, which means I got to go take out a loan. And what I sell the chickens for isn't covering that loan. So it's almost like they don't even own their own farm anymore because they've I hate to say made a deal with the devil. They've gotten locked in, and now somebody else is dictating what you do with your own land.
Right. Well, I mean, I think about the idea of, having chickens in a coop, and having fresh eggs kind of that way. And then I think about, raising chickens, to have for my own poultry, knowing that I raise them the right way. But then this is where the puss effect comes in. I can't kill a chicken. There's no way. I had to find somebody else to come in and take care of these chickens.
What's wrong with you?
I don't know. I told you that, I want to eat venison. I want to eat, more sustainable meat, and better meat for me. I couldn't shoot a deer if you paid me to. Now, again, if you're going to give me some apocalyptic scenario where I have to go out and survive to feed my family, yes, I could kill a deer and I could gut it. I'm just saying that right now, it's easier for me to have a friend who loves to hunt, and I say, hey, do me a favor. Would you give me a deer tag? I got you a deer tag. Would you get me a deer and help me up? Fuck yeah, I'll be happy to. They just don't care. And so I know it's bad. I'm squeamish. I like football. I've tried jiu-jitsu. Is that manly enough? Why am I trying to defend myself? I just don't like it. When I see stuff happen like on TV, and I see like Food Inc., when you see like animals get slaughtered, stuff like that, I'm just like, God, I can't stand it.
Well, I think there's humane ways of doing stuff like that, and you need to decide if you're going to be somebody who's going to be chowing down on meat, that is an animal's muscle.
Right. Well, maybe I just decide that, okay, so I can't be the slaughterer. It's not my gig. I can't do it, But if I'm willing to pay Mary Jo down the street who's got chickens, and that's what she does to earn a living, hey, I'll give her $5 a chicken. She's willing to do all that stuff. It doesn't bother her at all, I'm willing to pay her for that to give me chickens, and I have a freezer full. Maybe that's okay.
Do you think part of the problem is I mean, so many people have removed themselves from being farmers. So many more farmers are going to the cities, just like what they were talking about in China. You know, farmers are moving into the cities and they're getting away from the sustainable thing, which is you have to feed yourself. We don't feed ourselves anymore. I mean, me cooking food technically is feeding myself, but I'm not gathering that food. I have no
I think it's laziness. I'm not willing to kill a chicken. You know what I'm saying? I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to put myself in that position where I have to do that. I'd rather pay somebody else to do it for me. So I think it's a selective, laziness on our part, because yes, you and I have had gardens in the past, but were they a garden that we had to fucking have?
Was it a garden that produced anything? Not Matt's garden. Matt's garden died. Matt's garden was brown.
Hey, buddy, A for effort, all right? But if that had to...
Matt's wife hated Matt's garden.
Yeah. If that had to sustain you, we would have put more time and effort into it. If it was something that, oh my God, I have to have so many cans of this or so many jars of this to make sure we make it through the winter time, then it would become a pretty big deal.
Well, my point is that we've removed ourselves from that foundation of growing stuff and caring and knowing what's in our stuff. We're so removed from it where it's like, whatever you want to do. And for there to really be change, I think people need to plug back in to the process. They either need to hunt more, or they need to go to their local butcher, or they need to search out local farmers and say, I'd like to make a deal with you. And then I'd like that cow to go to my local butcher. I think people are gonna have to plug in.
Well, and I think that what can happen is things like you and I have talked about, like, okay, so we don't eat all kinds of, beef. So could you and I together share a cow, and we find somebody who has sustainable farming techniques that we agree with, and we say, okay, we're going to give you this much money on this date for this cow. And he says, okay, I'll make sure it's processed here, here, and here. You guys come get your meat. You do the same thing with a pig. You do the same thing with people who have poultry. You find people, if you and I got a buffalo, Jesus, do you know how much meat that is?
I have no idea.
It's like 1,000 pounds of meat. 500 each.
Just around the neck?
I don't know how they're built. Is
the neck meat like the really good meat on a buffalo?
Again, I don't want to kill a chicken, so how the fuck would I know about a buffalo head meat? Okay. So I just think that's one way you can plug in. Instead of being like, oh gosh, I don't know where to go or what to do, find somebody that you can agree with and say, hey, would you be willing to go in with me on this? You and I find 2 other families that say, hey, do you want a quarter of a pig? Do you want a quarter of a cow? We know a guy who makes sure it's grass-fed, no hormones, no antibiotics, no shit going into it. Are you down? Yeah, $250 a piece. There's $1,000. The current farmer's happy as a clam. When everybody, that's a sustainable way of doing something.
Where does that saying come from? Happy as a clam.
I don't know. Jesus. Did you hear anything I said? Or are you just going to focus on the stupid...
Why is it stupid? Because I asked the question?
No, silly things I say. No, stupid things I say.
No, it was actually a stupid question. I was just trying to do it to put it in a little bit of frivolity.
Do you have your dictionary open on your computer?
I'm just...
Is there a thesaurus open over there?
I'm just saying...
Are you trying to use big words on purpose?
There's certain people that enjoy words like frivolity. English majors.
Oh.
Air
another
quotes.
Shot for Leah. That's
Air
nice.
Quotes.
She'll appreciate that.
But nice. I like podcasts like this because it is just spreading the word.
Yeah.
It's bringing awareness, it's spreading the word. And if you want to do better, or if you want to know what could possibly be harmful, you just want to educate yourself.
Exactly. Get informed.
This is what I really dug about the book. It's based off her dad's research. And her dad he hasn't been co-opted he didn't do it for anybody else's concerns but his own.
Right.
Nobody asked him, hey, I'll pay you so much money to do some research and write down some notes. No. I mean, it was his own personal, this is what I'm seeing.
Record of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, this is a record of what I'm seeing. I'm going to a farm. This is what I'm treating the animal for. This is what I'm seeing. I'm asking the farmer what he's feeding his cattle or his pigs. This is what they're doing. So I'm seeing the cause and I'm seeing the effect.
Right.
That's what I think is the coolest freaking thing about this whole book, about this whole subject and about her, is that it might be one of the most honest representations of data.
Sure.
That we as a public get.
He wasn't co-opted. He doesn't have a a direction he's trying to go or trying to convince you of, or a viewpoint. Excuse me. It's just, this is what I'm seeing, and this is what I'm finding. She's definitely interpreting it a certain way, but it's based off of just pure factual information.
Well, again, she's interpreting it, but she didn't say at any time, this is the cause.
Right.
This is the definitive thing. All she did was, here's a cause and here's an effect. It's up to you to decide. Are they linked? There is no actual hardcore scientific data. No one wants to put forth the money, or there's money being put forth to block it, to prove one way or another. But all we can say is, if this happens, generally unhealthy animals. Mm-hmm. And if this happens, this farmer says, I'm not going to eat my own stuff.
Yeah,
I'm going to eat the cow down the street.
Right.
That's weird. Down the street.
It is down the street. But I'm just saying that you're right. It is. I mean, it's strange. I mean, that right there just gives me pause. I'm just like, okay, so first of all, I don't eat any beef very much at all. First of all, if I do get farm-raised beef or
you're not American.
If I do get if I get grass-fed beef, it's expensive. So it's almost like a splurge. Hey, honey, I bought 2 sirloins and they were $11 a piece, uncooked, not at a restaurant. I'll prepare them, but they're grass-fed, no hormones, no anything. So it's almost like, you having to find, it's like a special occasion to have something like that. And I just think that's disappointing. When you think of,
I want to eat meat every day.
Iowa Hawkeyes have, ANF on their helmets, and America Needs Farmers, which is what Hayden Fry put America Needs Farmers on the helmets to promote small farmers. But of course, in the 80s, during that time period, small farmers were going out like crazy.
Yeah.
And so we're still promoting this idea. I'm kind of trying to back up what you said of small, sustainable farmers doing things the right way. It's just not like that much anymore.
We enjoyed having our second phone interview. This one went a lot smoother. We figured out the setup a little bit better. Hopefully it sounded better for everybody.
We apologize. Eric Kleinik, CEO and co-founder of Sauce Hockey. We are all our apologies all the way around.
Yeah, I really enjoy the podcast, and one of the aspects I enjoy about doing this is having people in the room, because it's a very organic, it's a very natural flow of conversation. And it was so hard with Eric. I felt bad for him because of the phone interview, and it's the first time we've really done that. But we're learning. Every time we learn a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe he'll begrudge us another interview at some point.
Begrudge. Nice word. Yeah. You know who likes words like that?
English majors.
English majors.
Yep.
Bing. Leah Dunham. Anyway, one more thank you to Leah Dunham for being on the podcast tonight. I really enjoyed her book. I think it's very important. I think everybody should read it.
America's Two-Headed Pig.
Go out and
Amazon.com.
Or you can, PDF it.
Yep, and the webpage is good. She has a good webpage for it. Facebook has a Facebook link as well. So we will have all of that on the website, because when you're on our website, you can also subscribe through iTunes. You can also subscribe through Stitcher.
Stitch. It's a stitch, like a stitch in time.
A stitch in time. A stitch in my arm. A stitch for my mouth. Something. Stitcher. You can get on Facebook and like us. You can get on Twitter. We tweet more than anything else. We're going to start twooping as well. I like to twoop a little bit. Hey, it's Biz Nasty's thing, not mine. All right? Also, Pinterest. We try to get a lot of things on Pinterest, because I don't know about you, but when I'm watching TV or I'm doing something mindless in my house, whether it's watching TV. It's pretty mindless. But I like going through Pinterest. And so I'm trying to get a lot of things on our Pinterest site as well. But theprimalscream.org is how you can get directly to us. You can listen to the podcast right there. Also on YouTube. We are now on YouTube. And we're fiddling with the idea of videotaping our podcast and just putting it up on YouTube and then having it on the website as well. And that way, Matt and his wonderful way of editing would be freed up a little bit with his time. He could just be done. That'd be
I'm actually going to be I'm twiddling with the idea of going to our local college and seeing if I can indoctrinate a what do you call that? An intern. An intern.
Help us set it up.
You know what looks better on your frickin' resume than saying I worked with the Primal Scream for 6 months or a year, and I doubled, tripled, quadrupled their listeners.
Yeah.
I
set up their whole entire webcast.
Hey, mister, that's real life experience right there.
All Let's take it easy.
All right. I'll bring it down. I'll bring it down a notch.
Sweet. So,
I'm Matt.
I am Todd.
We'll see you later.
Adios.
Good night.